Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome back to the new era of agriculture commodity trade. Welcome to the session 3, day 3 of Commodity Week World 2026 or CWW 26. Just a visual and mic check. Neeraj, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear.
Awesome, awesome. So thank you, everyone. And so earlier today, we opened this global marathon. Sorry. Earlier today, we opened this global marathon by mapping the high-stakes supply and policy dynamics of rice complex in Asia-Pacific corridor, followed by an unfiltered look into the command center of the global agricultural sector in our CEO corner. Now we pivot from the who and the what to the how. We are looking at the invisible infrastructure, the digital and physical architecture that allows global trade to survive in a fractured world. We have declared throughout this marathon that the agriculture value chain has crossed a critical threshold. The traditional playbooks, the one that relied on predictable crop cycles, stable freight corridors, and reliable trade alliances, have officially expired. We are no longer observing the cyclical market corrections. We are operating within a baseline of permanent structural volatility. Over the next 3 days, we are continuing to bring the global boardroom directly onto your screens. CWW26, organized by HnyB Tech Incubations and Know Your Commodities, presented by AgriGuru Online, and is supported by Co-Agri, Varshan Group International Dubai, and Bingani Group. Our association partners include OATM Myanmar, Ukraine Pulses and Soybean Association, and GOPKI Indonesia, along with the institutional partners Solidaridad and the World Cooperation Economic Forum. CWW26 is moving entirely beyond the delayed data and historic balance sheet and heavily scripted presentations. This is an unscripted, unfiltered war room. We are here to democratize the high-stake market intelligence, mitigate the systemic risk of information asymmetry, and equip you with the foresight needed to defend your margins. As a reminder, our sessions are being live across multiple digital assets on LinkedIn, YouTube, X or Twitter, Facebook, and on our own event website. You can find the links in the comments. Let's talk about the macro view, and that is beyond the fundamentals. None of the commodities move without the sophisticated machinery of logistic and predictive power of technology. The theme for this afternoon is the innovation shield, securing the value chain from seed to shipment. We are moving beyond traditional supply and demand fundamentals to analyze the collision of extreme physical friction and advanced technological transformations. Today, the global agricultural value chain is under unprecedented pressure. We see severe climate volatility in the field, making traditional yield estimates obsolete, with complex maritime choke points from Black Sea to Strait of Hormuz, which are threatening the very concept of certainty of delivery. In this fractured world, technology is no longer just an upgrade or nice to have efficient tool. It is the ultimate strategic anchor. It is the shield that protects your supply chain from the world that is increasingly unpredictable. The theater of innovation from Spacetech to smart logistics is here. To understand how the world's most resilient trade houses are protecting their margins, we must look at the comprehensive tech revolution reshaping the industry from soil up. Let's break down the critical pressure points our AgTech and logistic experts will dissect today. Spacetech and AI, which are the new eyes of the market, we are witnessing a revolution in yield optimization and digital farming, in predicting the price, predicting the supply. At the same time, Spacetech analytics are now providing real-time high-resolution data, not just about the crop progress, but also of the soil health, that bypasses the traditional lagging government reports or analyst overviews, estimates, and projections. AI-driven market intelligence is no longer just about processing old data. It is about anticipating the next weather anomaly or policy shift before it hits the wire. Another area of importance is robotics and automation pivot. From automated harvesters to robotic processing facilities, the industry is leveraging automation to solve structural labor shortages and ensure consistent quality in a high-speed trade environment. Automation is transforming traditional milling and storage infrastructure into modern bioenergy-ready hubs. AgLogistics, which is also a very critical piece of the puzzle, especially what we are seeing today, what's happening in Black Sea or West Asia, rewriting the physical route is the key. As the risk premiums soar in traditional corridors, IoT tracking and the real-time logistic data are allowing traders to bypass bottlenecks, whether it is navigating the maritime execution risk of the Black Sea or finding alternative parities when major port like Santos faces congestion. Agile ag logistic is what keeps the global food systems from grinding to an halt. Opening this war room, the day of relying on lagging monthly trade statistics or outdated operation frameworks are over. In a world of permanent volatility, navigating extreme friction requires elite ground level foresight. We are going to exert that foresight right now. We have assembled an elite strike force of top strategists, AgTech pioneers, and logistic masters. These are the individuals who are building the innovation shield, the technology and the physical frameworks required to secure the value chain from seed to shipment. Our mandate for this session is simple. No scripts, no filters, pure intelligence. We are going to uncover how integrating next generation field AgTech with agile AgLogistics builds the ultimate resilient framework to secure global food systems. To our live audience, please engage with the technology leaders and prepare to rethink your digital and physical infrastructure for the future. The market does not wait, and neither should you. It is time to secure your strategic edge. Welcome to the AgTech and AgLogistics session at Commodity Week World 2026. Let's officially open the Innovation Shield War Room. With that, I would like to invite my first eminent speaker, Dhanashri Mandhani. Dhanashri is an innovative technology entrepreneur and executive serving as the founder and group CEO of Salam Kisan. Backed by a strong foundation in data science and enterprise strategy, she specializes in designing end-to-end digital agriculture ecosystem tailored for rural smallholders. Her core expertise centers on deploying AI-driven crop advisory platform, drone as a service infrastructure, and tech-enabled market linkages tool that systematically enhances farm yields, optimize input management, and future-proof small-scale farming practices. Welcome, Dhanashri.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, and I would say one of the young entrepreneur I always love to talk to because the type of work you have done is phenomenal, and I think going forward you'll go strength to strength and see to it that actually you make all of us proud.
Thank you.
Okay, so let me dive straight away into the first question. How is the deployment of drone as a service infrastructure practically reshape input management and structural cost efficiency for rural smallholders?
Okay. So, in the India sense, drones only would make sense if they make ROI sense for farmers and if they are affordable and accessible, which means drones can't be owned by farmers, but they can be called upon by farmers. That was the simple thesis behind how we worked on our model. So at Salam Kisan, we're deploying drone as a service for farmers with 2 to 3 precursors in mind. One, we create farm plot maps for farmers and help them with early stress detection. Once the early stress detection signals are sent to the farmer, then they get booking windows. In these booking windows, they're told what are the spray windows in which they should be spraying, and this is based on stress indicators as well as weather indicators. Once the farmer actually books the spray, then our field executive or the drone entrepreneur who has the drone, we call them Salam Kisan Sarthis, they go to the farmer, and then they do a verification of the pest with RGB images. Once that is done, a prescription is given to the farmer. Whatever inputs the farmer wants to use, they use that, but it is reduced by at least 40% with the drone specific standard operating practices that we've created hand in hand with lots of government bodies and ICAR certified institutions. So essentially, in terms of input usage, there are a couple of factors here. Because of drones, any which ways, because of the mechanics of the drone, 30 to 40% reduction in input usage happens upfront. But because of the early stress detection and the pest detection and the prescription service that we offer, which is detect, prescribe, and then spray, it acts as a preventative and predictive spray instead of a reactive spray. Usually in India, farmers only look at stress signals with the naked eye, go to the retailer with the leaf or the problem, and then ask for agri input. Versus in this practice, it is more predictive, enhancing the overall efficacy plus usage of agri inputs, making the productivity higher and the efficiency stronger. and it also uses less water. And whenever drone spraying is used, and we have this data on 2.5 lakh acres or 2.5 lakh sprays that we've done. So whenever drone spraying is used, especially for pest management, there's 95% reduction in pest as compared to traditional 60 to 65% reduction in pest with manual and traditional methods of spraying.
No, that's awesome, Dhanushree, because actually overuse of pesticides is also a problem with the commodities because higher residue levels lead to a lot of rejection when actually the material is exported out of India. So you're solving not just the problem of the farmers physically spraying, but you're also ensuring that food is safe for all of us. Congratulations for that. That brings me to my second question. So what are the primary hurdles in driving the adoption of AI-driven crop advisory platform, drone-driven pest management or drone-driven surveillance among farmers who have traditionally relied solely on general knowledge?
Figuring out the right financial model around this is the most important factor, in my opinion, because that's the only thing that can drive adoption and scale. So one is the entire model or whatever services you're offering should make unit economic sense. And that's exactly what I started with. So farmers can't be owning the asset. It has to be deployed as a service for them at large. So that's one of the biggest hurdles, having the right financial model and having financing available for the entrepreneurs who want to take this up and then give it to farmers as a service. That's one. Second, I think overall in general is awareness regarding any new technology, frontier technology that comes. So once you're able to scientifically explain to farmers, showcase results, then the adoption is exponential. But in the beginning, of course, the biggest challenge is to make farmers aware that this technology is actually going to help them in multiple ways, not just one.
Again, I couldn't. I'm surprised I'm talking to someone so young, frankly, right? Financial model most important, and actually you'll be surprised. Like when I'm by the way I'm 49, right? And I've engaged extensively with a lot of AgTech. Myself created and sold AgTech companies as well as engaged on a regular basis a lot of AgTech players. And you'll be surprised to know that actually after struggling for multiple years, they get into the unit economics. Generally, the unit economics they talk about is only on their presentation when they are pitching to an investor. But deep down, actually, when they reach out to their customer and especially the farmers, I think this is a missing picture they are not able to solve, and you've been able to solve that. Kudos to you and excellent. That is what I can say. I would say you are pretty matured for your age. So that drives me to my next question. How do you end-to-end digital agriculture ecosystem successfully future-proof the small-scale farming practices against severe localized climate events like flash floods? And now we are also seeing, I would say, the broader challenge of climate. You would have heard a lot about El Nino, right? Now we are seeing this climate volatility is becoming far more regular. How do you see that digitalization can play some role in solving some of those challenges?
So I will go beyond what I do here for this particular
Please,
question.
please, please.
Yeah. Uh, Drones solve one part of the challenge, rather two parts of the challenge. One is execution on two activities, spraying and seeding. In terms of the other factor or other problem that they solve is data collection. So drones act as a data layer when we talk about digital public infrastructure and when we talk about digitizing the ecosystem, the most important thing is having live data. So one of the other things that our same drones do is also capture live RGB data and then put it back on our servers to help farmers with spray reports, with analytics, with even yield estimations. So that's one bit of what we are doing. But at large, digitization in terms of remote sensing data, IoT data, weather station data, all of this would help in driving precision agriculture and frontier technologies and ultimately leading to climate resilience, because precision agriculture is nothing but using the right dosage, the right amount of seed, agri input, doing everything at the right time and being precise about all your activities. There are about 13 to 16 activities during the production stage of a crop, from pre-sowing to harvesting. So all those 13 to 15 activities have to happen in a precise way. Now, for them to happen in a precise way, weather has to be taken into consideration. All the local factors like soil data, weather data, pest data, plant stress, NDVI, chlorophyll index, all of these data points have to be taken into consideration. Now, traditionally, whatever was done, one might argue that, traditionally, abhi tak we've been doing agriculture and it's been working just fine for us. So why should we move to digitization? Why should we move to climate resilience or precision agriculture? So my only answer to that is that for us to be able to enhance our productivity, enhance our efficiency, we have to move as the weather moves. So before, weather was more predictable, weather was more stable. Now it isn't. All the climate indicators show that, for example, El Nino or all the other things, like last year itself, rains had spoiled a lot of grape crop in the regions that we operate in. Sugarcane had become very difficult to manage as well because of the late rain showers. So such factors now are affecting the set traditional practices that farmers had. So there's no way of them knowing what activities they can plan around the weather. And deep data, local data is going to help them set these practices better and know when to do what, in simple words. So I think that's the role that data and digitization would play in climate resilience. And then, of course, there's an entire biological side and input side to this on climate resilient inputs and climate resilient seeds. But since we're talking about digitization, I wouldn't want to get into that. So two things in a nutshell to answer your question. Digitization helps with local precise data capture, which then helps give farmers better steps and calendars and better practices, which will then enable them to work and move according to the weather, not against it, with it.
Perfect, Dhanushi. Dhanushi, another important question, you have scaled pretty fast, frankly, which you don't see so often in AgTech. It takes multiple seasons to scale up, and you have done very fast. Do you see you're getting the right sort of support from the ecosystem, which includes the government as well? Because I see that you are engaging extensively with the government, and I think you were with the Honorable Chief Minister also in Davos, if I'm not wrong. So what sort of support and encouragement you are getting from the ecosystem, including the government?
So because what we're trying to do is new, and because Indian agriculture is pretty reliant on government subsidies and support, and because there are multiple other factors why there is so much deep government involvement in agriculture in India, but that makes it important for us to have the government's support in driving adoption for any new frontier technologies, which is why we engage with the government on scaling this and driving adoption. So in terms of support, I would say that it is still in very early stages. This is not support that is at national level. This is not support that is scalable yet. But the idea is to do proof of concepts with the government so that we can shape how the policy frameworks are in the next decade for digitization of agriculture, for data collection. And I mentioned digital public infrastructure in the last question as well. So India is talking about DPI for everything. DPI in agriculture needs data. And for data to come, you need data nodes. And drones would be acting as that data node, which is why we're working with the government to ensure that drones can be deployed at scale. Every village can have a drone that can act as a execution plus data node. So that's what we're working on with the government with two agendas. One, we should be able to drive policy frameworks and policy advocacy around usage of drones and digitization in agriculture. And second, in terms of the support that we're already receiving, it's all state level support for smaller programs to show impact and proof of concept, which will then help us scale it further. So we've set up about 200 odd entrepreneurs via government support. This includes subsidy support. Then it includes we've gone all in and figured out the financing bit for the entrepreneur. including CSR support from private organizations, subsidy support from the government, and then loans from bank. So these are three very difficult things to do. And we've done it together in the entrepreneur model, where we've also gotten loans done for women who didn't even have a CIBIL score, with guarantors. And, it was a pretty hard thing to do, but we were able to do it. It requires a lot of patience. It takes time. So that's that on the government support side.
Fair enough. So, Dhanushree, before I let you go, last question. We have seen that the drones' capabilities and capacities are improving, right? And we have seen, unfortunately, in the crisis, right, how drone is being used, right, in defense, in wars. Do you think that those capacities which have been developed for defense can also be utilized eventually in agriculture by increasing I would say, the cycle, reducing the total cycles, having more sprays done per drone per hour, or maybe better remote sensing? Do you think that those technologies will eventually get into the agriculture as well?
So when any technology evolves in any country, defense then moves into civil use cases. The technologies that are developed for defense end up being dual use technologies that move into civil use cases. And this has happened with many other technologies. It will happen with drones as well. For us, and just for context, Deepak ji, we didn't we haven't spoken in a bit, but we're now a completely vertically integrated drone company and technology service provider. So we have our own manufacturing vertical, we have our own government certified training vertical, and we have Salam Kisan for drone as a spraying service. So at Prime Aerospace, which is our manufacturing vertical, we've already started developing multiple drones with different capabilities, and we've already supplied to the Indian Army in the last quarter. Those technologies that we've developed have the best in class AI sensing, computer vision for combat, for identification, which again, all are models that can be applied for agriculture to increase the efficiency. There are higher payload capacity drones that are developed for defense, which again will have a huge impact when used in agriculture. Of course, there is a huge regulatory barrier here. To get all of these kinds of technologies certified for civil use cases is a 2-year period, 3-year period game. But we definitely see that dual use case happening, and it immediately enhancing capabilities of the UAVs and the AI models available for agriculture.
Dhanush, definitely we have not talked for maybe last 6-7 months, but frankly, I only stalk 2 people on social media. One is my son and another is you. Okay, because I'm very hopeful from both of you, because the type of work you guys are doing is exceptional, and I saw your beautiful photographs with defense people which you have posted, and that was the reason I asked you this question.
Yeah.
Because I could see that, like, you would be bringing and you rightly said, like, again, that is, I would say, very mature thought process. Internet was actually created for defense, AI was created for defense, and they are game changers, and I believe, like, more and more technology being developed for defense. That's, I would say, irony that actually we create something to kill, but eventually it helps the humankind and the mankind. And thanks a lot, Dhanushri. Wish you all the best. I hope you keep on making all of us proud. We are so proud of you. Thank you.
It was a pleasure speaking to you right now.
My pleasure. Yeah. So now we go to our next speaker, and we had a good discussion about a young budding entrepreneur and a very exciting prospect when it comes to changing the agricultural landscape of India in Dhanushri. Now we go to a little bit, I would say, west, and we are having Diego Hotter. He is a pioneer AgTech entrepreneur and corporate strategist, currently serving as co-founder and CEO of ucrop.it. Operating deeply within the Americas, he specializes in agriculture sustainability tracking, blockchain-driven crop traceability, and digital farm management solutions. His unique expertise lies in building cryptographic verification architecture that map on-farm ESG matrices, thereby enabling large-scale growers to seamlessly access premium eco-conscious market, green financing, and carbon offset incentives worldwide. He also serves many smallholder farmers' supply chain, for example, in Mexico, where they trace and verify Nescafe farm-to-market attributes for farmers to better access market as coffee is regulated product. Welcome, Diego. It's pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you very much, Deepak. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, Diego, actually, blockchain has been something of a very exciting prospect of late. And actually, I've been, I would say, been working on blockchain for a really, really long time. In fact, I did, even if I'm not wrong, way back in 2020, where actually we did 16-hour sessions from different stakeholders on blockchain. It was a virtual event known as Blockchain in Agri. And I've been talking about it, but very rarely you see on-ground implementation. And congratulations to you that actually you are bringing the vision to the ground. Great to know that. So let me delve into the first question. According to you, how is the blockchain-driven crop traceability actively transforming the way large-scale growers in Americas access premium eco-conscious market, which was a part of your introduction itself?
Sure. For context, as you know, Deepak, the market for agriculture goods is changing in terms of compliance. And so across the world, we're seeing standards and regulations on the origin of food, fiber, and bioenergy evolving towards more rigid requirements around land use changes, deforestation-free links, crops traceability for lowest chemistry applied on the fields, for environmental fertilizers application that reduces the carbon intensity in agricultural goods, the practices that enhance water footprints, and ultimately the need to bring forward the data consistency into cereal boxes, boats, and ships of biofuels, vegetable oils, flowers, and all the food, fiber, and energy products that are out there. So blockchain is a great tool in order to create evidence through data collection at farm level that ultimately endorsed by the farmers, that provides the legal rights to use the data to basically demonstrate across the supply chain how farming is done on more nature positive attributes on a verified way. So building, collecting on the farmer's data and using that data in the shape and form that the compliance of multiple standards in the land use change and in the crop traceability space for positive land use change in terms of preserving reserve areas, biodiversity areas, farming on non-deforested fields, and while farming those crops, reducing carbon intensity and improving water and reducing the environmental impacts of chemistry. It's framed into crop stories, the way we do it at You Crop It, that ultimately are rolled out downstream for our customers to be able to report on their products and their compliance reporting, how, who, and where, and when they have achieved those results on a proven way, and do it at scale for actually to be auditable and reduce any greenwashing liabilities, but most importantly, being effective in doing a claim that actually reward the farmers for their improvement and transition their products at the shelf level towards a more real nature positive agricultural economy worldwide.
That's a great use case, and I would say on-ground action of, I would say, a blockchain, because whenever we talk blockchain, people start connecting directly it with cryptocurrency, right? So you name the blockchain and people say, hey, do you know something about Bitcoin? Is it going to go up or down? But that's good. Actually, the world is changing, and we have started seeing that the base of cryptocurrency, which has been one of the most stable innovation by human beings, is blockchain. So I would say the right use cases are huge, and I think it's good to see people like you investing in them and using them. So that brings me to our next question. How do the digital farm management solution practically bridge the gap between abstract corporate sustainability mandates and the daily reality of agriculture production? You talked about farmer data, so collecting the data, putting it on the blockchain, and then ensuring that actually right sort of stakeholder ecosystems are part of the blockchain network. They validate it. So it's a pretty, it looks very simple on the face, but I know, you have gone through a lot of pain to ensure that this system works. How do you see that actually eventually it is bridging the gap between the farmers and the corporations?
Right. So we at You Crop It currently trace on an annual basis 72 million acres across 17 countries, spanning Americas, Australia, selected countries in Europe, with farmers participating in many corporate programs on impact-driven agriculture, farm to market, where this data is being proven. So basically, the short answer to your question, Deepak, is data collection, because farmers with their data have an option, which is to showcase that to the supply chains or not. While they do that, while they exercise the option, they with UCropit, they know when they showcase their data in crop stories that Nestle or Mondelez or Heineken or Cofco or any company that is using their data use it for a purpose which it's which has a very specific objective to get compliance on the crops and the regions on where they are sourcing these feedstocks from these farmers, to basically achieve compliance with these regulations on many different geographies. So the option for the farmer to showcase the data ended up in a farmer's better position for them to sell their products and access their market more swiftly, without the friction of them being the ones that have to prove out their data, because we handle all the data collection and structuring and verification for the farmer free from charge, as the ones that are paying for this service are the companies that are sourcing feedstocks from them, and that are in the need of the compliance for basically reporting these claims. So farmers are better off because they showcase their data with a specific purpose and scope for compliance. They get a certification on their compliance, and the companies that source from their farmers are in compliance to the current regulatory frameworks that regulates land use change and crops metrics such as carbon intensity, emission reductions, water improvements, and better environmental metrics. So I think that ultimately it's about the farmer choice to showcasing the data, platform like UCropit to put the data in the shape and form that is in compliance on a verified way with the needs of corporates, and then the corporates using this data to claim provenance of achievements in environmental metrics that are directly reporting back to the growers that were the main characters of this, right?
Oh, perfect. No, I understand. That's great model where, because actually farmer is able to utilize the technology at the same time, it does still all the way back to the consumer who is getting benefit of whether it's ESG or whether it is reduction of the carbon, or showing their product to be, I would say, sensitive to the environment, because nowadays we have seen that people like to buy those products more, which are healthier at the same time also healthy for the environment. So I would say that it's a great model, and it's good to know that actually this model is already being operationalized by you. So now my next question for you will be, what are the most significant execution challenges in building cryptographic verification architecture that accurately and immutably map on the farm ESG matrices? Because we are seeing that has always been a challenge, and as we move toward the carbon credit economy, this become more important, because then the money would be involved, not just the trust, not just the perception about the company, not just the marketing talks or annual report, but there would be money involved. How do you see that actually this technology would map up to that?
Right. So first, the first challenge was to build data collection capabilities, because farmers usually have the information in silos and in different shapes and forms. Some farmers, especially smallholders, low-tech ones, have spreadsheets, or not even that, notebooks at the field level, which need to be digitized and collected as data for evidence, right? More sophisticated farmers, mid ones to large ones, they use Excel sheets or some farming monitoring solution, which might be or not mobile. And then you have large farmers which have ERP systems, right, and more sophisticated way to interface machinery with their ERP systems. So the first thing that we have, through the 8 years that we are in the space building our company, solved for was data collection, because you need to basically extract the data in the way it is, for not to be only an attestation for the grower, but the evidence that shape the way crop cycles has been managed in terms of agronomic recipes, in terms of products applied, in terms of fertilizers, inputs that has a great impact in carbon emissions, in terms of chemistry and crop protection products, that the genetic use, the labors involved, right? And so farmers, you cannot ask for farmers to load that data into your platform. They won't just do it that. They have no time for doing that. So we have created infrastructure to basically collect on the data by them throwing this data into big drive folders that we then get into our smart warehouses and organize it automatically with AI to basically mimic the crop cycle that the farmer has pursued in terms of the evidence provided, and to basically verify that that evidence is consistent to the outcomes involved in the crop cycle. So for accuracy and basically auditability. And then from the polygons level, in the data collection example as well, you need to basically enable the farmers a very simple way to draw their polygons on a mobile app, or even from or to remote sense that, which we do by using satellites with Earth observation, and being able to load at scale those field plot of land represented in polygons, digital polygons, where the land use change assessments are screened on, and the crop traceability data is built on top of that for relying on traceable metrics like carbon intensities, water footprints, land use change in compliance with different land use change standards, deforestation free limits, etc. So data collection is a big thing of what we have solved and remove friction out of the system in order to load it up, because non-farmer nor people working with the farmer has to do that. We do it ourselves. They just throw us the information. On the second stage is monetization. We have proven to our corporate partners, and we have more than 60 big multinationals working for us in different 17 geographies, is that even if you reward the farmers, right, on these efforts, which they do, at the cost shelf of traceability per unit is less than the 10th part of, it's like 8 cents, it's less than 0.08 cents on a dollar. So basically, it's very much inelastic to do so, right? Because technology enables to basically scale provenance and traceability farm to market in a way that it is cost effective to do so. In the old days, you would have to send people at the fields, and that was not as scalable. It's human based. It's not basically economically feasible to do so. But now, by mixing Earth observation algorithms, remote sensing, and digitalizing the farmers' data towards creating crop stories that accounts for land use changes and crop traceabilities, you just rely on technology to do that. So basically, this enables farmers to be rewarded and companies to get the information they need on an accurate basis, evidence-based, and endorsed by the farmer in a way that it's auditable and claimable without the extra cost or the additional cost to pay a consumer price on top of the product in order to finance that. Because, as I said before, the cost is basically inelastic, it's close to zero at the shell level. So now that companies can pay for this, and it does not require an additional money to do so, because it's margins built in the efficiency of the supply chain on the data trace. The third challenge is adoption. Companies are awakening to this new paradigm, right? Just 5 years ago, I would say no more than 10, the conventional way of serving the markets with agricultural goods was, to source feedstocks that farmer has put on the ground, take care of the plants, harvest the grains, and sell them, right? There was no real need for data behind that on nature positive attributes or the compliance of data on a primary basis collection from the farmer to roll down the value chain to prove claims around CO2 emissions or land use changes that are free from deforestation hazards, or water enhancement solutions, or lowest chemistry of the field for food safety. Now there is, and that has shifted very much and very fast in the last years, though the companies are awakening to this. And as any change, it demands time, right? Companies are reacting slow. They used to react slowly to this. Now they are catching up at scale, especially the CPGs and the traders that are involved in the crushing industry of vegetable oils or biofuels, because regulatory frameworks, especially in the US, Europe, and Europe has evolved and matured towards the need of demanding this information on a primary databases collection. So now adoption is beginning to scale, but it has been, a long haul in terms of a journey.
Perfect, Diego. So, Diego, last question to you. Do you see the carbon financing evolving and more money coming in? Because I was part of GOP28, which happened in Dubai, where the first time we got agriculture as one of the subject, right? When we are talking environment, and you'll be surprised, till then agriculture was not even a part of environmental discussion. A lot of money was committed, but unfortunately that money is not being seen coming on ground. You are seeing that green shoot coming up where more financing is now available for typically green agriculture?
Yeah, well, Deepak, as I said, companies are reacting to this, like changing the paradigm at their own pace. The adoption is increasing, especially on the companies that buy things from the grower, like CPG companies, biofuel companies, trader companies, which is the right way to evolve. And finance will just follow that trend, right? Because the bank or the institution, especially those impact funds that are financing efforts to, leverage real impact metrics across global agriculture, are looking forward to fund companies that are on the right side of their positive achievements, right? They don't want to be liable, as well as the buyers' companies, of them financing someone that is not, or that is not claiming real things, or that is in the risk of being liable for not doing enough for nature positive attributes to scale within the agricultural environment. So I think that the finance sector is starting to catch up with this, as their natural customers, the CPG companies, the biofuel companies, the vegetable companies are catching up with this as well. So they are following this trend, and they will not. There's no doubt. Ultimately, finance is the most ubiquitous input in the world. So they will eventually turn this financing at scale into nature positive verified finance or sustainable finance, as you mentioned.
Awesome, Diego. So we all are hopeful more money will flow in the right direction. And if you can you can plan for having a budget of $1.5 trillion as a defense budget to kill people, then definitely you can look at least 2 to 3% of that coming in making world more habitable and environmentally friendly. Thanks a lot, Diego. It was a pleasure having you, and thanks a lot for sharing the great work you're doing. I'm a big, I would say, supporter of blockchain, right, in social sector, especially healthcare, education, and agriculture for sure. Thanks a lot. Looking forward to engage you further in our upcoming sessions as well. Thank you, Diego.
Thank you, Deepak.
Fine. So from India, we move to Mexico, and now let's go towards Africa. So my next speaker is Sheena Raikondi-Alia. She is a prominent international development and venture builder, serving as a chief growth officer at Kusa One. Backed by extensive experience across the UK and the East Africa, she specializes in designing scalable agribusiness models, mobilizing blended finance, and unlocking economic mobility for youth and women in rural ecosystem. Her core expertise lies in driving operational expansion, cultivating public-private micro ecosystems, and spearheading financial inclusion initiative that connects smallholder farmers network to digital market ecosystem. Welcome, Sheena. It's a pleasure to have you on this webinar.
Thank you, Deepak. Really great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Awesome. So, Sheena, let's delve into the first very important question. You just heard, actually, we're talking about financing, right? Green financing. Now, let's talk about blended financing. So, how is blended financing proving to be a critical catalyst for designing scalable, resilient agribusiness model across East African rural ecosystem?
Yeah, no. So blended financing is core, because if you really think about it, the way systems are structured here in Africa, commercial capital on its own cannot make sense. So just to give you an idea, interest rates here can be anything from like 25% to 50, 60%. That's commercial loans. Now, if you think about any agri value chain, from a farmer to an agribusiness, you don't make enough margins to meet that. So I think one of the things that so one of the things that is extremely important is how do you reduce the cost of capital for the end user? And then I think sometimes the blended finance question, and of course, everybody will have heard about the usual blended finance tools like, guarantees, first loss guarantees, technical assistance. They all exist and are being experimented in different ways and forms. But I think the key question for me when I look at these blended finance tools is finance is not a means to itself. Finance is a means to an end. So what we want financing to reach the farmer. We want financing to reach the agribusiness. We want financing to reach the agri-processor in order for them to improve their productivity, increase their incomes, grow their business, hire more people. So I think where we can find blended financing instruments that actually reduce the risk to the end user and increase the market opportunities for them to use their finance in a productive way, that's what we need. And that's what we definitely need to see in this market.
Awesome. Very well articulated. And I totally agree with you. Like, the finance at the right cost is most important, right? Just having finance doesn't help. But end of the day, it should serve the purpose. It should not be so expensive that eventually, you can say that the operation successful, but patient is dead. So I think this is a great insight where actually right pricing. And in Africa, I travel extensively to all parts of Africa. And I've seen financing at the right price is a problem. Financing is not a problem, but the financing at the right price is a problem. So that brings me to my second question. What specific operational expansion strategies are most effective at bringing youth and women directly into highly competitive digital agriculture marketplace ecosystem? We know that actually, there is a possibility of Africa to leapfrog using digitization. I'll just give an example. Africa never had landlines or landline-based internet, but the mobile internet has changed the things drastically. In fact, I can recall maybe I think 8 or 9 years back, you used to have a mobile payment, which was not even that time. So spread across in India. So Africa has always adopted the right sort of innovation. According to you, what are the ways and means where, because rural unemployment, right, women empowerment has been always an issue in global South in general and in Africa in particular. So how do you see that it can be integrated into digital agriculture ecosystem?
Yeah, no, great question. So I think one of the big issues, right, is we need to work with our markets. You can't just import solutions here. So let's think, what do we have in Africa? And I think for Asia as well, right? We have a lot of rural youth and we have a lot of women, in agriculture. Agriculture is a huge component of what we do. So how do we get more women in this sector, but not just more women in the basic size? How do we get more women in the sector, but more women earning more money? So I think first of all, it starts with a mindset shift. I think we really need to start moving the conversation. Instead of talking about agriculture, we need to start talking about agribusiness, right? How agriculture is just like any other business. What do I need? What inputs do I need? What assets do I need? What financing do I need? And how do I use it to make money? If you want to get youth in agriculture and you talk to them about agriculture and they think about their grandparents and the manual farming and how they're not earning money, you're never going to get them. What we do at Kuza is we talk about youth in agribusiness, where you can use technology, where you can earn money, where you can be linked to markets. And you know what? Most of our agripreneurs are youth. They're young people and they're in rural areas. And I'll give you an example. Some of our agripreneurs, and of course not all of them, but some of them, we call them level 3, level 4 agripreneurs, are earning from $1,000 to $3,000 per month in rural areas. And those role models, right, is what inspires other youth to come in. So I think sometimes it has to be, you have to show people the opportunity, change that mindset and do it. Now for women, the other thing is a lot of the times, we want to make all these changes, but the reality is you have to meet them where they are. So unfortunately in Africa, land ownership is concentrated more with men. Women do have more of the burden of household, elderly, children, etc. So in our model, what we've done is we're slowly trying to change that. But realistically, we're working with them where they are. So when we work with women farmers and we assign them with mentors, we do it where it's available via telephone, virtual, everything at their time, at their convenience. We meet them where they are and what they need. And I think if you start designing contextually for where the women is instead of where you wish them to be, and of course, I'm hoping over time we will get them where they are. It's the main thing. And thirdly, I really think we need to not try and follow the models of the West. They're not going to work. We don't have as much capital. I really wish we did. We talked about financing, and yes, there is more financing that is coming into the continent, and yes, green financing and climate financing and the rest of it. But if you really look at it, it's all going to carbon markets, which is mitigation. What we need is financing for adaptation, for resilience, for local communities, and less than 3% of that financing is actually reaching those communities. So as much as we talk about it, we have to really figure out, how do we meet people where they are, and how do we design models that work for us? So I'll give an example of something that happens at Kusa. We use technology called edge computing. Right now, edge computing, what that means is it works offline. Right? It doesn't need, it doesn't need internet, doesn't need electricity, it's sort of battery charged. What that means is a lot of people can work offline, and then of course you connect online to upload your things or download videos, but it's tailored for contexts where data is expensive, sometimes internet doesn't reach. So when we thought about mobile money in the example that you gave, right, is we contextualize it for our money. Why did it take off in Kenya? For that reason, because it made sense for us. And I think as we build for Kenya, I think we need to also think the biggest opportunity is Pan-Africa, right? If you think about and everybody mentions it, but even if you talk about the US, China, India as well, Africa has the world's growing population. It has the largest youth population. Our median age in Kenya is 19. Think about what it takes to feed a 19-year-old boy. What's even more exciting is our traditional crops, our orphan crops, right, is what they're called, because the West, and I guess during colonization, we started growing maize, and things like that. But really, what grows traditionally in Africa, the millets and things like that are traditionally drought tolerant. And number two, they're automatically, like cassava, etc., are gluten free. Think about the huge market there is for gluten free in the world. Think of or in Africa. So I think it's a real mindset shift. Let's start thinking about like the business opportunity that we have, and I think from there will definitely attract more women, more youth, and the rest.
Sheena, your understanding of Africa is second to none. You were born in Africa?
I was. So I'm obviously ethnically Indian, but my great grandparents moved from India by the British to build a railway. So fourth generation, over 100 years in Africa, in Kenya and in Uganda. So yeah, so originally from India, but that was like 4 generations ago. So I have my grandfather was born in Africa.
No, because actually, I engage with a lot of Indian diaspora in Africa as well as African as well, and I found your understanding to be pretty deep, and that's what is important. People should create solution in Africa who understand Africa. Unfortunately, what happens is that people like me just are paratrooped and they try to learn, and then they believe they have understood Africa, but Africa is very different than the rest of the world, and see, it is divided across lingual lines, it is divided across the climatical zones, it is divided across even the mindsets, right?
Yeah.
East Africa thinks very differently than the West Africa, than the Central Africa. Even in East Africa, Tanzania thinks very differently than Kenya, or Mozambique is altogether totally different ball game. And then you go a little bit down, and Zimbabwe, then you find that actually, they are not even. They don't even talk about anyone in East Africa. So that's I think the depth of knowledge you're having in exception. And I'm also very positive about Africa for multiple reasons. Africa is having huge amount of uncultivated land. Africa is having, as you rightly said, demographic profile of youth. Third thing is that Africa is having a lot of opportunity to go upside, right? At the current stage they are in, there is a humongous possibility for them to leapfrog. And with, I would say that the ingenuity of the people there, warmth of the people there, I think they are the perfect place to actually look at the world of future. So that brings me to our next question. Sorry to delve into it, but I was not able to stop me because of my love for Africa. In fact, whenever I speak about Africa, I always say that I'm not African because I was not born in Africa. I'm African because Africa was born in my heart. So, so that's yeah. So now let's talk about a little bit of how to cultivate public-private micro ecosystem that can successfully withstand the macroeconomic and climatic shocks currently hitting the African continent. We are seeing El Nino, and we regularly see the challenges of weather, and we also see macroeconomic pressures created by not Africa, outside Africa, but impacting Africa. The West Asia crisis is creating problem of availability of fertilizer, challenges with the availability of dollars to buy things. So how do we create a right sort of, I would say, frameworks which can be micro ecosystems using both public and private enterprises?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And to be honest, like I think every crisis comes with a silver lining, right? So for example, I think COVID came with a little bit of silver lining, Ukraine. I think what all of these crises, Iran, COVID, everything, what it's shown us in Africa, I think is, we also need to have a mindset shift ourselves. We need to stop relying on the world to come and save us. Nobody's out to do that. No, everybody's acting in their own self-interest, and rightly so. But at least now that is very, very clear. What that means is, as Africa, we have to think, change our own mindset, and build differently. As we discussed, like as an individual country, whether it's Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, whether it's South Africa, whoever it is, we're individually quite weak, but united as a continent, Africa, we are very powerful, right? And a lot of those kind of things are already in place. So if you look at AU, what they've come up with, the AfCFTA, the Africa Free, Continental Free Trade Agreement, that's super powerful. If that, how we have a European Union and how, and how they united. So I was at a panel just last week, and Professor Bitangi Nemo, who used to be PS, Permanent Secretary in Kenya, he said something very, very interesting. He said, it's not like Europeans loved each other when the European Union was formed. So just like that, Africans, we don't have to love each other. As long as we get together where necessary. Right now, it is more expensive to travel across Africa than it is for me to travel to Europe or the Middle East. Yet we have the frameworks like SATEM, etc., in place. So right now, what we need to move on is, with the public-private partnerships, is figure out, to get a pan-African trade. So another example that's going to shock you: in Africa, we lose $5 billion a year in currency transfers, right? Which is for payments from Kenya to Uganda, etc. And yet we have solutions like PAPS, which is the intra-Africa payment solution, where you can actually do trade in your own local currency across Africa. So what I'm saying is, now is a time to move from just talking and conferences to actual action. And you mentioned the fertilizer, right? And I think some of the most interesting innovations that I'm seeing here in the continent is actually, sometimes fertilizer is not something that we need. It's been sort of, a lot of the soils in Kenya are acidic. So fertilizer is not actually helping us. It's making our productivity even lower. We need more soil solutions. And I've seen a lot of companies, from innovators to companies, doing things like avocado waste or pineapple waste to biofertilizers, which are actually working. So maybe, as horrible as this crisis is, maybe it'll again say we shouldn't be dependent on centralized fertilizer, and maybe we need to have decentralized, manufacturing of sort of, organic waste, which can really, really help. And the fact that leading companies and innovators are doing it, for me, is very promising. At least it shows that there are models, and yes, they haven't been scaled yet, but maybe that's the opportunity.
No, you couldn't be more right on the fertilizer part of it. Whenever I travel to Africa and people ask me your experiences of the green revolution in India, how it can be adopted in Africa, I always say that try to stay as far as possible away from the fertilizers. Don't actually get your soil addicted to it. And as you rightly said, and one of the reason actually, I would say shallow understanding of fertilizer has led to the increase in acidity in a lot of lands in Africa, because when urea is not available, they start using ammonium sulfate that further enhance the problem of acidity. So Sheena, now coming to the last question, what digital innovations you have seen in Africa which you feel are going to drive things forward?
Oh my God. So Africa, and I swear, it's a continent of innovators, right? The big challenge is not the innovations, it's scaling. So if I just take agriculture and the AgTech sector, I see innovation after innovation, from soil testing to weather to irrigation, solar irrigation, to sort of Kuza itself with its edge computing, the distribution model. With AI, I've just seen so many. I think the issue again in Africa is the fragmentation, it's the scale. See, as much as we talk about Kenya, Africa, the purchasing power is still low, right? Everybody has an amazing innovation, it'll just cost the farmer $1, or it'll cost the health worker this much. But the reality is, we have to think, in a continent where at the moment, the majority are sort of low income earners, right? How do we scale innovations? And I think this is where I would love to see more. I'd love to see kind of more on how do we do sort of market making, market creation. The innovators are there. So I'll give you an example. When I was working for the FCTA for the British government here in Kenya, I ran a program with insurance, with InsurTech, and there was all these amazing insurance startups, right? But for each of them to expand even into Africa, that's 54 different licenses, 54 different regulations, forget the license fees, the time taken. Now imagine if you had harmonization so that my Kenyan innovation can be recognized in Uganda and Uganda can be recognized in Tanzania. And then all of a sudden you've created markets. Of course, you can have sandboxes and things, but I think we need to have not just more individual siloed innovations, which there are many, and technology is changing at such a fast pace, but how do we get them scaled? How do we get them to the people that need to use them at a price point that makes people able to use them? Because otherwise it's just all cool, really cool, sexy things to talk about, but how do we actually get innovations that are grounded with what we need in reality?
Couldn't agree more with you. Sexy is not always right. It has to be actually scalable. So both start with S, but scalability is more important. Thanks a lot, Sheena. And your name is also with S, so I think you'll be able to
Yes.
create scalable solution for sure. Thanks a lot, Sheena. It was a pleasure interacting with you. Next time, in fact, July, I'll be in Kenya and looking forward to meet you in person
Please
for
drop
sure.
me a message. Yes, I would love to meet up. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Cheers. Bye. So now we go to our next speaker, and in fact, we are having in-house my co-founder, in fact, in one of the ventures I'm associated with. We are having Dr. Hansa Karakia. She is a visionary co-founder of AgriGuru Online, a cutting-edge global marketplace redefining commodity trading through AI and automated execution frameworks. Holding a PhD in electronics and communication alongside 14 years of tech sector experience, she specializes in machine learning, integration, and signal processing. Her professional focus centers on replacing traditional paper trading models with transparent, automated digital platforms that successfully minimize the transaction friction and lower cross-border trade cost. Welcome, Hansaji. It's a pleasure to have you on this event.
Thank you, Deepak sir, for the warm welcome. Thank you to give a good introduction and informing about that we are in the co-founder in the similar company, AgriGuru Online. Thank you very much.
No, Hansaji, actually, it's a privilege to be your co-founder. I always appreciate, the great work you have been doing. And it's an honor to be associated with AgriGuru Online, a very exciting startup. So for those who are not aware, AgriGuru is actually creating an excellent AI-based stack, which will help traders not just to understand how the prices move, but also how the logistic works. And this session is about tech and logistic. In fact, this is the only company which is connecting both. So if you are worried about how do you route your shipments, which would be the cheapest possible way and the fastest possible way, AgriGuru is the place to be. The third thing, which is very, again, important, is that we are structuring the complete trade flow and automating it. Now we are seeing that whenever you trade, you have to create so many of the document, the GAFTA, trade documents, customs document, and everywhere you keep on doing cut, paste, and creating those type of solutions. And here actually, seamlessly data, you feed it once and it appears everywhere, reduces the friction, reduces the errors. And we all know one error on the bill of lading can be very costly. And this type of unnecessary cost is what can be saved using AgriGuru Online solution. So Hansaji, let's get into the question.
Sure.
See, I couldn't stop using my marketing head, because actually I believe the great work which we are doing need to be shared with general masses. Hansaji, first question to you. What are the most significant technical and regulatory hurdles in replacing legacy paper trading model with fully automated digital execution framework? Because our traders, kagaj pe likh diya, it works. Why to get a technology? Who will get into in front of a computer? So how do you take care of such legacy issues?
So basically, if we talk about this AI era, you can transfer $10,000 to your relative account seated in the different country within the second. But if you want to transfer the cargo from $10,000 from India to Europe, it takes too much documentations, right? So it triggered the paper that hasn't fundamentally changed in last 400 years, if you can see. Basically, in the instant global communications, where we are having the self-driving cars, we are having artificial intelligence, the backbone of the global survival, that is the trading of agricultural commodity, still relies on the physical piece of paper stamped with actual ink and flown across the ocean to the courier to just prove that it's owned for that particular vendors. So basically at AgriGuru Online, our mission is to end that. We are building the engine that fully automated the global trade by bringing a 400-old system into the 2026 is not just about building an app. It is a massive bottleneck against the two forces that is deeply rooted in the technology and the stubborn global rules. So if we talk about the digital regulatory form for the technical point of view, we can say that if we transfer one PDF and we convert into the digital form and give it to another one, let's say about the bill of lading, BOL, right? BOL is not only the title, it say that is the ownership of the particular cargo. So when we transfer that transfer, when you transfer to the another vendor, it should be deleted from the origin. But if it will be remain as it is, then it have a two owners, like one who have these two documents. So the ownership will be changed according to that. So that is the main hurdle, that once your document is transferred, it should be vanished from the first end. So that is the one digital drawback. So digitize and receive is not that much easy. Making sure that when the digital baton is passed, it should be vanished from the previous vendor and completely and securely. So we saw that there is a different digital network finally talking to each other successfully and making that this thousand of global port is for one major technical mountains. Second thing is that it should be 99% sure that it should be perfect. So to automate the trade, our system have to pull the data from the different formats, like from the different language, different sensor, and we need to filter out the noise and make the smart contract. The algorithm can't be just good, it should be perfect. Bridging the gap between really a smart AI and flawless executions keep the entire team of our executive awake at the night to make that sure that your document will not make that kind of error. It should be perfect. It should not be like it have a 99.9% accuracy. It should be good enough to transfer the data. So that is the main second thing of the digital level. But if you cannot forget about the human tendency, people are still focusing on that pen and paper work. Like if we say that the India, Netherlands, and France has now adopted the digital documentation model of bill of lading in the electronics form. But when you are transferring that and when you reach to the another country, your cargo is going from one country to another country. And when you reach at one particular destination, when they say that, oh, we are not accepting that digital document. So what you require to do? You need to change that documentation digital form to the, again, physical form. So that is also a physical, or we can say the human tendency thing, that they are not accepting still. Many countries are not accepting that the document should be in the digital forms. So some are accepting, but some are not accepting. So that is another hurdle for transferring that document to the fully digital form.
Perfect, Dr. Hansa. It's well said that 99.99% doesn't work. It has to work 100% of the time. And I think that is what makes the AgriGuru solution very important. I would also touch upon very important aspect, when you are having such a critical data, right? And we have to ensure that integrity and security of data, where we are talking about millions of dollars in international physical trade, and they rely directly on a specific platform or algorithm. How to ensure that actually integrity and security of data is achieved?
So when we talk about the AI, right, people will say that it's a magic black box. And whatever you pass the data to the AI should be secure enough. But you don't forget that AI is the one algorithm that can maybe bias also, right? So what, as the global trade is totally massive, you have the different kind of the data. You are having a data from the customs, you are having a data from the buyer, you are having a data from the seller. So it passed from the different sources and you are collecting that data. So your AI should be only reading that data. It should not take any decisions, right? So when your AI is reading the data, is generally converting your data into the one particular format. So all the data will be extracted from the different sources and then it will be universal data kind of the thing we are having. But your AI is just only universal translator. It's not doing any decision. So you need to make sure that your AI is only reading the data. Now, after that, what happened? You need to make your AI data to be secure enough. So once you are having the data, you need a human also intersect that if there is something, the similar kind of data, then human intention can come into the picture and it take the data whether it is fully secure or not. After that, your smart contract should be encrypted properly. So it have a crypto technology inside that. So when it is passed to the another one, it have some key, then and then it can be extract that data. So no one other than the owner can take the data from that particular document. So your smart document should be have that kind of the encryption technologies for extracting the data. So when you transfer the data digitally, it cannot be like everyone have the data, but they cannot extract that without the key. So that is one thing you require. So the thing in the data is that you are having X labels, then and then you can make a decision of the Y. Like at the port side, when you are having all the data that, okay, the bill of lading is here, but it give information about that, okay, this is the thing, then you can have the data to be extracted from that particular document. To make the security of that, like maybe as we can know that the physical data also a temper. When you give the document in the physical way with the sign and paper, they may be forged also, right? They may be changed also. So physical documentations are also changing. Similar way, when you are doing the digital documentation, you need to verify that your data should not be tampered. So what you can do? So in this, we are making the one algorithm in such a way that it check the trigonometry 3 different category of the checking. The first thing is that it will check the GPS locations. So once the person say that your cargo is reached, it also check the GPS location. Once it is same thing, like if it is reached to be in the Europe, Amsterdam, then that GPS location should also be similarly way represent that address. So that also be checked. Second thing, your smart contract, when it pass through the one particular node to the another node, it will give us the path, right? So it should also give information that it is not changed throughout the region, throughout that transmissions. Third thing is that your custom officer, the custom officer, when it's check the cargo and load that amount, that also check with the document that, okay, this much is the weight and this is also verified here. So three required to check, and then only after that the document is passed. So it will pass to the 3 different segment, and if it is covered, then only it is passed to the another one. And the last one, it required to be have key for that document to be accessed. So once it is passed to the owner, it will be vanished from the original source. So the eBell is not exist to the 2 persons. It exists only to the 1 person. So when it transfer from 1 person to another one, the source where from that it is transferred should be vanish that data. So that way we can make a secure digital data in the system. So that is the
Perfect.
thing, that the security of the data must be not tamper here.
Perfect, Dr. Hansa. Very well explained. And I believe, like, people who are listening, they would understand how secure our customers' data is. Now, coming to the last and final question to you, Dr. Hansa. Logistic challenge we are seeing upfront today, right? In the past, logistic people used to see it as just one of the activities. But we are seeing the world is changing. We are seeing the cost of logistic increasing so much that sometimes, like, the commodity costs less than the logistic itself. In this scenario, how is the AgriGuru online platform helping in ensuring people's logistic costs get reduced?
Okay, so let's see first the example. Before that, what we are doing, we are using a physical map to reach one destination to the another destinations, right? So in that particular physical map, we are not having any information about the traffic. We are just moving from source to destinations, right? After that, what happened in the current scenario? Now we are having a Google map. When you open the Google map, you are having the enter the source as well as the destinations. In between source and destination, you see the different paths there, right? And you can see the exit traffic available there. So if you see the traffic jam in one particular destinations from source to destinations, you can change the route. You are having that privilege because of the technology upgrades. So similar kind of the technology upgrade we need in the trade mechanisms, and in AgriGuru Online, we are trying to incorporate this kind of mechanisms. So when you see that you want to transfer the data, you cargo from source to destination, and you have the all information about the different geopolitical issues, different the ports, traffic issue kind of thing, then you know that, okay, this much route from here to here, this route is very having the traffic. We cannot send our cargo through this route, and we are having the live informations about that destinations and the all route, and we can reroute that. Now, rerouting is not that much easy because it act as a different parameter that increase the cost of the things, right? So before that, if you are having all the knowledge, okay, this much geopolitical tension is arriving, and because of that, this route is closed, or all the cargo are transferring from this destination route to the another one. So because of that, there is a traffic jam. So you have exact data that, okay, your cargo will not reach on the time. So you can have that, like what you require to do for that particular thing. And you can, if you are having a GPS tracking mechanism there, then also you can track that where your cargo is, and you can have your documentation set at that particular destination according to that. Like if you want a rice from India to another country, right? And you have just loaded your cargo, and before that, you know that, okay, because of this, see, this particular route is closed, so you reroute that, and for that you need a freight to be changed. So you can ask your buyer that, okay, now the price of this freight is different, and you need to incorporate it in your invoice. So that kind of the change you can do through the AgriGuru Online, because AgriGuru Online is not only giving the price of the commodity, it's also giving the price of the freight, and it's daily basing updating. So you can have the idea that, okay, now for this particular route, your commodity price is not this much, it will be increased 200%, because generally right now is happening is the thing is that the freight is 500, and the next 2 days you can see that the freight is now $5,000. So whatever your commodity price that required to reach to the destination have this much amount is now suddenly become too much high. So you cannot afford that. And you can see the different sources also there. Like from India, you cannot take, from Pakistan, you cannot take, from this route, you can have this commodity, because you are having the price of the all different country origin commodities also. So from that, you can take the price of the product from the different country origin. You can also have a freight mechanism, and you can track that where your cargo is right now through the tracking mechanism in the applications. So all this will be benefited to the person, because right now in current scenario, all data are like changing in the way that, because it's not about in the GPS tracking mechanism also, because of the Gulf War, what they are doing, they are just switching off their GPS mechanism. So you are not having that data also, like your cargo is read at the Gulf locations, and or it will be middle of the something else. So this kind of thing we require to route on this particular applications. So you are having the exact information about that, and you can do rerouting of that. You can check a price from the different destinations, or you can take a commodity from different origin and transfer to that particular area. Or you can having idea that, okay, this part is currently blocked, I cannot have this thing is here, so you can store that also. So there are the two mechanism. One, you can save the price through the traffic mechanism area. Second, you can know that, okay, this particular commodity cannot reach in these destinations because of so and so issues. All this information is available on the platform, because we are not only giving the price and freight mechanism, we are also giving the important events or important news about the geopolitical issues, or the current commodity freight increasing because of the war. So all this information is also available on the platform. Using that, you can have a predefined your thing that you can have this commodity to be export or import or not. So that will help you in that costing in the future to
Perfect,
predict
Dr.
that.
Hans. Perfect, Dr. Hansa. We have created, like, something which I believe would be porter for in a future for the agri commodity, right?
Yes.
You book and you are delivered. Thanks a lot, Dr. Hansa. It's always pleasure to hear,
Thank
like,
you.
your the passionate way you speak about the solution. That shows, like, there is just not sweat but blood also gone into it. And I know, like, for the audience, right? She's having a young kid, like, just 1 year old, and even after that, she's putting all the effort to make this platform a successful. And we need women entrepreneurs like you in more numbers, Dr. Hansa. Pleasure having you on the platform. Wishing you all the best, and let's do it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So now that make me move to my next speaker, and I'm having Mr. Rafael Berisuascas. He's economist for Latin America at Fast Market Forest Products. He's an expert macroeconomist serving as a senior economist, macroeconomist serving as a senior economist at the fast market, while also lecturing on global value chains at a leading Brazilian university. He specializes in the regional macroeconomic forecasting, export corridor logistics, and analyzing commodity supply chain integrations across South America. His unique expertise combines practical business development with economic modeling, providing international corporations with critical insight into the structural and fiscal shifts of Latin American trade. Welcome, Rafael. It's a pleasure to have you on board, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Deepak. You hear me okay, right?
Yeah, perfectly fine. You're loud and clear, and you're talking from one region which is now very important center of, like, because of El Nino, we are all banking heavily on Latin America because Asia is not going to produce sufficient amount. We are seeing North America also having challenges, and with the region you specialize in, I think we will be having a bountiful. So let me delve into the first question. How are the shifting regional macroeconomics reality in Latin America actively dictating the flow and integration of global commodity supply chains, sir?
Cool. Actually, this is a very interesting question. Well, integration and commodity supply chains are a hot topic right now, and everyone is pretty much trying to understand how they look in the new, let's say, so-called deglobalized world. But I really want to push back gently on this wording. What we are actually seeing is less deglobalization and a little bit more of regionalization, and Latin America plays a big role on this. So the pursuit of cheap raw materials, low-cost labor, and new customer markets remains quite intense all over the board. And not every country has all the natural endowments or resources to supply those raw materials. So upstream value chains remain connected in a few places, and very little of that can actually be moved to do those resource restrictions. So what's actually moving in this new global reshaping is the downstream. So value chains are getting closer to major consumers on the downstream. And these shifts are restructuring pretty much along new geopolitical and new, I would say, corporate lines, but not necessarily dismantling. And here comes Latin America. So this repositioning is a little bit dramatic. When you look for this year, the outlook, the political outlook, it's a little bit clouded because of political instability. We have elections in Brazil, Colombia, etc., high debt, and even uneven policy response for the countries, which is constraining growth and investments across the region. But actually, we face is a paradox because this doesn't change necessarily what means for agri exports. The export economy is behaving very differently from the domestic economies, which are been just mirroring those political uncertainties. So let's give some color for you and take Brazil as an example. What looks like pretty much a resilience and flexibility from a value chain perspective actually is masking a weak domestic market that cannot absorb what's being produced domestically. So taking the last year example, after the US tariff pressure in 2025, China, Singapore, India, and Argentina absorbed much of the redirected trade that Brazil used to put on the US market, but was not able to do so. So GDP grew, the supply chain held up, and everyone looked happy. But here is where the catch is, because those new buyers, especially China, have more bargaining power in this situation. So Brazil had to accept lower prices and thinner margins. Inside Brazil, manufacturing is slowing, wages are stagnant, consumers are stretched, and that happens pretty much on Argentina, Colombia, and all over the region. So agriculture and mining ultimately are performing well, but those sectors don't distribute income evenly across the value chains. So we could say, think this like a shop that loses its best customer, scrambles and try to find new ones. But the shop is busy, new customers are coming, but they're making less money per sale and pays staff less. So the whole margin situation is a little bit complicated. And if you add on the macro backdrop, this new currency dimension that we're seeing in 2026 with the US dollar weakening all over the world and getting a little bit weaker versus other currencies, this is genuinely affecting the export outlook for the region. So because this happens as a double-edged sword. If you think about stronger local Latin American currencies, they erode farm gate revenue in local currency. So farmers are selling soybeans priced in US dollars, but they're paying workers, truckers, and input suppliers in Brazilian reais. Even worse, they have acquired inputs with a more complicated exchange rate 6-8 months ago, and now are seeing the revenue dropping a little bit. So I would say we are in a moment where not only Brazilian, but pretty much all Latin American farmers are producing record volumes, but still watching their margins shrink simultaneously, which creates its own downstream pressure across the region.
Totally agree. Couldn't agree more with you. There are some of the challenges like currency to the local expenses and as you rightly said, the choke points. So that brings me to another important question, what are the most critical infrastructural bottlenecks currently choking export corridors logistic across South America, and how are international corporations attempting to bypass them? We are seeing the logistic being one of the challenge, even in Brazil, getting from the central Brazil or North Brazil, crop all the way to the ports, and again, congestions at the port, road infrastructure, storage infrastructure. Where do you see the bottlenecks actually?
Well, the bottlenecks are real and they are felt right now and every moment that all agri exporters have to deal with their own operations. When you think on those bottlenecks, I think we need to think on who is investing to fix them. And it tells us a little bit about where control of those value chains is heading to. So, as you mentioned, Brazil, let me take this as an example. Brazil's truck independent system is actual a hurdle for exporters. Only about 14% of all our interstate roads are paved, which create huge chronic bottlenecks. And if you compound this to long queuing lines on ports, it becomes a cost for exports. So if you take, for instance, the Miritituba terminal at the Amazon transshipment point, we do have faced lines that extended up to 30 kilometers in the early 26. So truckers spend more than a day just to unload their trucks. If you go to Santos or Paranaguá on the southeast and the south of Brazil, you can have up to 27, 30 hours driving from Brazil's central hubs to those port lines. So logistics is a bottleneck, and it's institutional bottleneck in Brazil and all across the region. And who is actually trying to fix this? So we do have state capital and private capital. From state capital, we do have state capital coming from local governments, which is scarce, and we have a lot of Chinese state capital being invested on corridors. And from the private perspective, we do have Western companies and even Asian companies investing on their own solutions. So on the Chinese side, I think the strategy is unmistakably about vertical integration of the entire export corridor. I would say one of the key examples is the Chancay port in Peru. It's pretty much Beijing's largest overseas infrastructure. It costed about $3.5 billion and is in full service since last year's. But what I'm mentioning here the Chancay port because it slashes transit time from South America to Asia from 35 to 23 days. And so essentially we are trimming it in almost 50%. And it does accommodate ultra large container shipments for fresh fruits going out of the Andean region to China. And I'd say the Chancay is just the Pacific end. We're also seeing other investments from Chinese companies moving for the building of logistics corridors connecting the two oceans. I can talk about this a little bit later, but we do have corridors being placed between the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. From a Brazilian or from another, I would say, state perspective, we could mention a few railway projects. But from the private capital, from the private sector, I think one of the most important notes is that companies are also using the same global value chain strategy, which is vertical integration. What I mean by this, they are building their own port terminals, they're building their own logistics corridors from their mills, from their warehouse in Brazil's central west, in Brazil's countryside to the ports. So they do not rely on the public roads, they do not rely more on public infrastructure, which is missing, which is lacking, and definitely is a bottleneck for the region.
Perfect. No, see, this is also very important because in the current scenario, in the current situation, we are seeing a surge in global demand for South American commodities, whether we talk about from Argentina, from Brazil, even from Colombia, right? Suddenly the palm oil of Colombia have been talked about. Nobody used to talk about palm oil from Colombia, but now people have started talking about it. And but the infrastructure remains, though it is improving for sure. But certainly overnight, you cannot change the infrastructure. You cannot change the capability of moving goods so fast. Do you see that could reduce the export potential of Latin America because of these challenges?
Well, the honest answer is it limits its potential of growth, to be honest. I would not say reduce, because global value chains are structured on a way that Latin America definitely serves the world as a huge supplier of upstream raw materials because of its natural endowments, because of its resources. But it can cut the potential for sure. So if you think about how companies are adapting, how the governments are adapting, I would say infrastructure has been and is running behind the production curve. So it's capping the potential of growth. Speaking of those capabilities to just, let's say, transpose these hurdles, I can mention two specific projects in Brazil. One is the Ferroground. It's a private finance railway that's connecting Mato Grosso to the north of Brazil, exactly where I mentioned where those 30 kilometers truck queues have been spotted in the beginning of the year. And this railway is being backed up by both public and private capital. So I would say it's a partnership between the two sectors, because not only a single one could be able to solve this issue. Another great project I would like to mention is the FIOL, the Ferrovia de Integração West-Leste, which is pretty much backed up by state in Brazil, and it's connecting east-west wise the country. So it's also something interesting. I mentioned also before the bionic corridors between Chinese and private capital in Brazil. And this is not necessarily in Brazil, but it connects Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Bolivia, Chile, and Peru. So we are talking about a actual South American corridor connecting the two oceans. For sure, this is not a short-term solution. So when you're talking about this, we're saying, yes, we do have projects, we do have private and public capital being invested here to just walk around those logistic bottlenecks. That's true. Current bottlenecks are limiting export potential. That's true. But those projects, they are mega projects. They should take a lot of time before they come online, they mature, and they are fully implemented. So yes, we are walking around infrastructure bottlenecks. Sure. Should this reduce exports? No, because global demand is still great enough to support those volumes flowing out of the region, and no other place in the world could supply in the same volume and the same scale and on the same cost as Latin America could. However, it's definitely capping the export possibility, and nothing should be seen solved, I would say, in the next 5 years. I would be very surprised if you see something coming online before that.
Perfect. So, Rafael, one last question to you. We see the bottlenecks. You talked about long-term strategy to solve those bottlenecks. But if you live in current scenario, for someone who is not from Latin America, who is seeing the Latin America from outside, what are the early signs where you can see that the logistic breakdowns are happening, whether in the maritime or whether it on the railroad? Because actually, what I have understood is that because of extreme weather also, sometimes some gateways doesn't work, right? You're stuck because you cannot move, right? And in that scenario, from someone who is outside of the continent, what are the early signals they can get so that actually they can structure their own operations accordingly?
Yep, sure. That's a very, very good question. I would flag five indicators to watch closely. But they're not necessarily indicators, but they are a bundle of indicators. So the first one I would say are currency movements. When we have local Latin American currencies strengthening versus US dollar, such as we're seeing today, we have seen Latin American currencies appreciating almost 90% versus US dollar. Farmers hold back on exports because they are definitely waiting for better currency returns. And this creates somewhat an artificial tightness for the export pipeline, and maybe could just create some surges of exports if currency devaluation happens on a very small window. So the FX rate is pretty much a logistics indicator here and also an economic one. And it also connects directly to costs of the capital in Latin America because it connects directly to interest rates. So if you're seeing higher capital costs, higher interest rates, definitely, even regardless of a subsidized crop financing in Latin America, it will shape the farmers' decisions of buying inputs for the next cycle. And therefore, you can expect some I would say waves or shocks on the logistics for crop inputs for Brazil, for Argentina, for Paraguay, and etc. At the same time, you're seeing some delay on exports. So FX and interest rates are the first one. The second one, I would say, port-based premiums. When you look for export premiums in ports, and they compress or they go negative related to CBOT or other exchange rate futures, that's a great early signal of a corridor saturation. And it shows up actually before any official data appears in terms of exports. So port-based premiums are the second one. The third one, which is it's not an indicator, but it's a more scenario, I would call it's logistics and trade policy shifts specifically, such as we saw just yesterday. Like sudden tariff changes definitely causes near-term cargo interdictions. So if a country, let's say, if the U.S. impose a tariff in Brazil, such as just happened yesterday, we may probably see exports and loadings to be pushed back all of a sudden, and this can create bottlenecks that will take a time to be resolved. So I would say predictability on trade policy as an indicator is important. Another thing that I think is important is harvest timing versus corridor readiness, including here waiting times on docking on ports and demurrage rates, which are quite easy to be seen and quite easy to be assessed. We're seeing that whenever the harvest timing slips while export demand stays flat or constant, ports, rail, and even river terminals seize up. And the gap between supply concentration and logistics capacity here is pretty much where breakdowns happen. So if waiting times on ports are increasing, you can spot that by checking the lineups, by checking whatever is on the line live time for you. One can spot that they are going through a bottleneck, and that can compromise exports and also crop inputs imports. And I think there is a last one indicator that's pretty much underappreciated, which is fertilizer prices and barter rates, and how this connects to logistics. So, when input cost inflation disconnects sharply from commodity prices, farmers reduce that given input, not necessarily fertilizers, but could be chemicals, seeds, whatever, application rates. And that flows through yield compression 6 to 18 months later on those crops, and ultimately throughout volumes. So if you look for the barter rates between crop inputs and agricultural commodities, you have one of the best predictors of crop productivity for the next crop season, and therefore how much logistic will be demanded for that season, because it tells you upfront what level of technology farmers can actually afford and how productivity will behave. So it's really important to see that. So in my own, I think the bottom line here is that South America supply chain is structurally indispensable for the world and for global food security, but still it remains extremely exposed to currency swings, crop input shocks, and geopolitical disruptions. So I think everything we have discussed today just comes back to one thing, which is my area of research, which is value chains. So who controls the nodes on the value chains, who bears the risks of the value chains, and who captures the value when the world throws a tariff shock, actually, or a currency swing happens or something like that, is on the control of that. And that's pretty much how we approach here at Fast Markets. We look beyond the spot price to what actually barter rates mean, to port-based signals, to crop input divergency, to fundamentals. Because here or everywhere else in commodity markets, today's price, the spot price, is pretty much the output of 1,000 of value chains decisions that were made long before that price was made. So that's pretty much how I see it. It's on a value chain perspective and fundamentally structured on analysis.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Rafael. It was a pleasure having you, and thanks for sharing such an extensive understanding of Latin America. Definitely our audience have learned a lot from you. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So now that brings us to our next and the last speaker. So we are having Mr. Lucio Lage Rodriguez. He's founder and CEO of Process Log and Comex and Big Blue, two of the Brazil's leading companies. Process Log and Comex specialize in international logistics and foreign trade and supply chain management, and Big Blue, an insurance company. With over a decade of hands-on experience in global operations, Lucio built his career from the ground up, including living and working in China, and today heads companies with over 550 employees. He holds a degree in international relations from the Federal University of Uberlandia and an MBA from University of Sao Paulo. Fluent in Portuguese, English, Spanish, with working knowledge of French and Mandarin, Luis is a frequent speaker at international event and recognized authority on international logistics, importation, exportation, and supply chain strategy in Latin America. Lucio, welcome on board.
Hello, Deepak Pareek. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, my pleasure, sir. And actually, you are on the hot seat. The world is running behind those who do insurance and those who can transport their cargo, and you are on both the ships. So thanks a lot joining. I think you are having a presentation. Would you like to share yourself, or do you want us to share? We can do both.
Okay, for me, please.
Yeah, sure.
You have it? I think it's better.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, here you
Perfect.
go.
Hello. So it's a pleasure to be here. The message I want to show you here is that the commodity that leaves Brazil is world class. The challenge is what happens between the silos or even the farms and the ships on the port. So we talk about the innovation shield and how can we protect the value during all the chain. So you can go to the next slide, please. So here we have all the process, all the flow of an import and export process. And here we have 8 points. In each one of these points, we can lose value or have an opportunity to earn value. And during all these years of experience dealing with the import and export process with commodities and many products, especially in China, when I lived there and I went there more than 14 times, we can see many parts and main risks you can have in each one of these steps, since the seed, the farm, the storage here in Brazil, the transportation until the port, the international trade, the distribution, and when it gets to the customer, the final point. And here I want to show you where you can lose value during all this process. Some examples. You can go to the next slide, please. So here we have many factors, many parts of the process that you can lose value. You have many risks. Since the weather, you can have a climate events like you can destroy the plantation or the crop. The limitation of infrastructure, since the roads here, for example, in Brazil, it's very limited. The logistics delay when the cargo arrives at the port, we have many lines, many queues that you can have delays, and it costs money. Documentation error. If you don't fill correctly the documents, you can have extra taxes. You can delay, you have the mortgage and many other costs here during all this process. The compliance, if you don't understand all the customs process, all the logistics process, you also can have problems, especially here in Brazil with all the bureaucracy. You have to understand it very well in order to have a good process and you don't have problem. For the cargo damage, many things can happen during all of these steps of the process, so that you can take care and use the insurance, for example, so that you can protect and you can save your value. Financial exposure, the currency swings, you have to have some mechanisms, some instruments you can protect the operation from. Many things can happen during the dollar flows, and especially the geopolitics, for example, with the trade wars and with the many of the tariffs and many of the taxes can increase, and all of your plans can change even during the process. So it's here where you can take care, and many things can happen during all the import and export process. And in all of these parts, you can lose money and you can lose value during the process. You can go to the next, please. And to protect this, we'll have 4 pillars that I can say, so that you can solve all of these risks and you can protect. And this is what we call the innovation shield, so that you can protect all your operation and have more predictability. You have more save money, and all of this can be faster and more efficient. So the first one, you can go to the next slide, please, is the visibility. And here we talk about you can use especially the technology, so that you can predict, so that you can have information to take good decisions. For example, you have the supply chain visibility. You have to have some systems so that you can track all of the cargo, so that you can have information here. We used to say that more important that having the products, that having the goods, that producing all of these products, the soy, the coffee, the corn in the farms. More important than this is you have data. Data is something you can manage and is what make your business different, and what you can take the best decisions. You can prevent your company from the risks, and you can flow, and you can make your business have success. And when I talk about data, you have market intelligence, forecasting. You can predict, analyze the weather, the prices, and the volumes, and you can have the tracking system, so that you can know where is your goods, where is your products in the ship, the vessel, where is the vessel, where is the truck, even here in Brazil or in the other country. And you must have this visibility in dashboards, so that you can have alerts and automated workflows, so that you can be clear, so that you can take better decisions. And the compliance, we say here, especially in Brazil, we have it's a very big bureaucracy, so that you must understand many of these parts, these documents, these procedures. And in Brazil, is some of the bottlenecks of the process or export process here in Brazil is the bureaucracy. You have to understand, because here, for example, the classifying the product with the AGS code here, we call NCM code. If you change, for example, 2 numbers of the AGS code, of the NCM code, the tax can increase more than 30% or to 60%. So many things can change if you don't understand the regulations, if you don't understand how to classify and how to fulfill all the documents. For example, the phytosanitary documents, also for the MAPA here in Brazil, we used to say, if you delay to filling some documents, if you don't fill this correctly, your process can delay, and you have to pay more and more taxes and more costs, that you have lose margin. The next one is the logistics. So it's a big bottleneck here in Brazil because all of the structure here in Brazil is based on the highways, different from China and from the United States. Here, 67% of the soy here, for example, are transported using the trucks. So it's in the productions, the farms are very far from the ports. So you have a big cost here. If you say, for example, from Mato Grosso here, where most of the production of soy here in Brazil to Santos is like 2,000 kilometers. In a small part of this is carried by the railroads. So it's a challenge to look for multimodal systems so that we can increase value during this. And also the shipping lines will have this challenge because of the distance from example from Santos to Qingdao, like 17 distance, and we're looking for new routes like the North Arc so that we can increase and you can have a different opportunity. You can go next. And to complete, also to make clear how this distance, we are here showing the how is this distance and how can we are looking for different routes so that we can take it smaller and change the types of the ships so that we can optimize this kind of transportation. And to complete, the risk management, the fourth part, and is to save value, is to doing the right risk management, because you can do this using, for example, the insurance. I always go back to that image I showed you, showing that 8 steps, and each one of the steps you can have risks, and the insurance can solve many or most of these risks, even during the production, the farm, during the transportation to the port, during the shipment, during all this process until the country here in Brazil, for example, and China. So the insurance is a very important part so that we can be protected, and also contracts so that we can protect the commercial part, the negotiation, and all of this, the business between one part and the other. You can be protected using the contracts also. And also, only to make it clear, for example, one entire process of, in this case, the coffee. And Brazil is the world's first coffee producer. So most of the coffee we drink all over the world is produced here in Brazil, especially. Now I'm calling you from Santos, close to the port, but my hometown is in the Minas Gerais department, which is the biggest biggest producer department here in Brazil of coffee. Like more than 50% of the coffee produced here in Brazil is produced in Minas Gerais. And we start the cultivation. For example, in a farm in Minas Gerais, you have the harvesting, you have the processing process, the grading and the storage. Then you go to the land, transport from the farm and for the warehouse to the port. The export process in the port, for example, in most of the coffee is exported from here in Santos. The ocean transportation, the import process, for example, in China, that is increasing a lot. Most of the Brazilian coffee is going to China. It is increasing a lot. And in going to China, for example, and being there for many times, and I can see this increasing a lot the coffee consumption there. We have big companies like Starbucks and the Luckin Coffee, and it's very famous, very popular there in China. And many of this coffee produced here in Brazil is going to there go to China, distribution, roasting, preparation, and go to your cup in one of these stores, I tell you. And what I can say is the future of the agribusiness. It's related to save value. I told you those 8 steps during all the process from the production to the export process until the end of the chain. You have to have food security, sustainability, like SEG process, traceability, so that you can know where is your goods, where is your product, where are your products, AI and trade and digital trade. I always go to China and I'm going to fairs there, and AI, technologics, robotics, it's increasing a lot. And all kind of business, it's been used and it's necessary. And especially in this one, you can have these technologies used in the agribusiness, since the drones, since the many of the parts, the logistics part, so that you can have more predictive risks and you can manage all of this process, and you can have more accuracy, and you can be success in your business. And this is especially the message I want to tell you. And considering this innovation, protection, I can say that the commodity that leaves Brazil is world class. The challenge is what happens between the silo and the ship's hold. Thank you so much.
Excellent intervention, Lucio. Right, you nailed it. Like, challenges. I think all those who want to do business with Brazil, they would understand what could be the complexities. And I know Brazil is always open for business, but it has its own complexities, and we can solve those complexities. Thanks, Lucio, for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you, sir.
Thank you so much.
So with that, we come to end of this 9th session of Commodity Week World 2026. And with that, I would like to thank all our participants, our speakers, our audience for being here and ensuring that actually we had a great day. And that great day is because of, as I said, like our speakers, our partners, and for sure our audience. Tomorrow would be a new day. Tomorrow we'll be talking about oil seeds and edible oil, another commodity which is actually keeping all the traders on their toes and also putting a little bit of anxiety in minds of everyone. We are seeing challenges happening all across the globe when it comes to oil seed and edible oil. Countries taking protectionist measures. When we talk about palm in Indonesia, when we talk about soybean, so we have seen the challenges between the US and China playing its role. So it's pretty interesting. 3 sessions tomorrow lined up for oil seeds and veg oil, starting from Asia Pacific, moving to Europe and Africa, and finally ending with Americas, which we all know is the global war chest when it comes to oil seeds. With that, signing off, I hope you like what we have been talking about and would have been insightful. I've learned a lot today, and I hope my audience would have also learned a lot. Thanks again.